Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, I'm down in this corner this time, we are doing the review of the set review. I'm trying to get everything out the way so that we can get into the Darkness Ablaze stuff. We still don't have the official English set list, so we can't start looking at new decks and speculating about all that stuff until I actually know what's in the set. But I want there to be no holding back as soon as we do get the true confirmation of what's going to be in it. So today we are going to be looking at the most successful cards and how we did in this set review. I'm also going to be talking about how things are going to look post-rotation for these cards specifically, and really just touch on their future performance, so that should be interesting as well. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. We will jump to Boss's Orders. Easy 5-star, no surprises here. It actually becomes even more important to play Boss because we lose Custom Catcher. So I played Customs still in Turbozation and in some of my Spiritomb Beast lists because I found myself wanting to draw cards every single turn and not be able to Boss on certain turns, which was frustrating. But for the most part, everyone else in the world was playing like minimum 2 Boss, maybe 3 Boss. And I think that's going to continue going forward. So yeah, we've still got, you know, Mewtwo Net, we've still got Eldegoss, so Boss is going to be like everywhere now. Great catchers still in format, obviously, but there's more and more V Pokemon coming out, like Crobat V, as well as Eldegoss, which might start taking over from Dedenne because Great Catcher is like a liability. Now, Dedenne is obviously still awesome, so maybe it just means that decks are adapting towards like 1 copy of Dedenne, 1 copy of Crobat, 1 copy of Eldegoss, maybe like all 3 of them. Maybe you got to pick and choose which one. Obviously, things like Eternatus and stuff will only play Crobat, so it might push Great Catcher out the meta. Custom Catcher's already gone, so it's like coin flips or Boss, and you probably always want a Boss. So yeah, really important card going forwards. Dan, obviously terrible. Milo has been terrible and probably will continue to be just outclassed fully by, as I say, Sinlin right there. Sinlin guaranteeing a supporter for the following turn and drawing 3 is usually better than drawing 1 random card because you're guaranteeing a supporter that you want, which is pretty good. Olena hasn't really seen play in control decks even. I thought it was going to be below the bar. It certainly seemed that way. And control loses a lot. It loses Oranguru, Lusamine, and a ton of their like tech Pokemon as well. So yeah, Olena is going to continue to be very, very poor. Skyla, I rated the 1-star. I'm trying to think if Skyla was played in any useful deck. Yeah, I really don't think it was. I think for the most part, it's, as you can see, outclassed by like Rosa, for example. If you are a stage 2 based deck, greens as well, if you wanted to go down that route. But for the most part, Skyla's just too slow. When you can't use her on turn 1, you'd rather just be like playing dig trainer cards instead, like Acrobikes to fill those slots, rather than adding in like weaker supporters. Because of the supporter rule change, it's literally meant that like you got to be playing Bosses, Researchers, and Marnies, and like that's it. You can't really play anything else unless you're playing Welders. So yeah. Sonia, we rated the 1-star. We actually need to bump this up to 3 stars. It wasn't the most popular way of playing Turbozation in the end, but it did win one of the Limitless qualifiers. So Sonia is a potential option in Zacian, which was a top tier deck. Now I do think for the most part it's not the best include. So that's why I'm not going to give it like the full 4-star treatment, because it was only really like a maybe sometimes if you're net decking one list kind of include. I'm pretty sure Sonia saw no play in any other list, but exactly Turbozation because you wanted to have extra access to Pokemon. Either you're going second and it's guaranteeing you Zacian and Oranguru, which normally meant that you could then use the monkey to put a extra metal on top, so you could guarantee an extra attachment on your Zacian with Intrepid Sword if you're the player going second, or like in that mid game it could either get you guaranteed attachments or it could get you towards the Jirachi Prism Star combo alongside a Mr. Mime in the same turn. So it was actually like aggressive in Zacian, which was like okay. I still don't think it's like ideal, and we've seen other Turbozation lists be successful without Sonia, so yeah, it's still pretty niche, I would say. Full Bucket was rated at 3 stars. Frostmoth continued to flop. It really didn't do well in this format at all. Pikarom was the most powerful deck in this format based on the stats that we have. So with a lot of nerfs to Pikarom incoming with the rotation, it loses Mountain, it loses Power, it loses Volkner. I think we could finally start seeing Pikarom decrease in play. Now that's me saying it's not dead. That's me saying probably down from tier 1. Possibly we'll start seeing some Frostmoth come out the woodwork. Also, one of the things keeping Frostmoth at bay was that Snom only has 50 hit points, and Dragapult going second just bodies you. Or if you're going second against Dragapult. And possibly Dragapult's in a bit riskier of a spot now with Eternatus VMAX coming out. So it probably takes both Pikarom going and Dragapult going. And by going, I mean like dropping the tier list significantly for Frostmoth to even have a look in. So I actually think Frostmoth could continue to be a binder card. Like, even though Pikarom and Dragapult are probably going down in play, it's got to go down in play like a lot. And then you have to be able to still beat the new consistent decks coming out. Water may come into this interesting spot where Centiskorch is starting to get a bit of talk, and it could be this strange anti-pick kind of thing. But I still think it has a few inherent weaknesses. So the Full Bucket wasn't enough to carry this deck, and I still think Full Bucket will only ever go really in Frostmoth. It doesn't really fit anywhere else. So I think probably continues to be like that 2 to 3 star category based on where you think Frostmoth belongs, if it's like Rogue tier or like tier 3, 4 kind of thing. Possibly with a Rose engine, we could see things like Inteleon VMAX use something like the Bucket, but that's pretty niche. So yeah, Frostmoth still in a weird spot. Potentially some of the Water VMAXs are worth looking into. And yeah, there's like Dreadnought coming out, but I don't think it's necessarily so much better than Inteleon or so much better than like even Lapras. That it's going to see that much more play. Nugget obviously was an awful card, even with Primate Wisdom and even with Smooth Over potentially, didn't see play at all. There's too much Marnie in the format, and that's not going to change really. Marnie's proven herself to be really important. Part of the reason why Marnie was so important actually was the amount of Baby Blounds in the format. Baby Blounds does lose a little bit here and there, so maybe Marnie starts creeping out or is in less counts than previously. Depends really on how many like VMAXs are a thing, because Marnie's still disruptive against those decks. But regardless, Nugget will continue to not see play. Rotom Phone. We didn't get it in this set in Rebel Clash, but we're expecting it to be in Darkness Ablaze, so I'll rate this a 1 star once again. You'll see this in a video soon. Scoop Up Net was crazy good, 5 stars. I'm very happy that I had the Jirachi Prism Star package. I actually mentioned Jirachi Prism Star a lot in the set review, and that was really just like, boy, I hope this works, otherwise I'm going to look foolish. But no, it was right. The Wish Upon a Star went from the meme to the dream, and it was crazy good. We started seeing Mind Report Mewtwo go into a bunch of decks, Giratina, Zigzagoon, so all of these sort of prophecies came true. Some of the evolution stuff was more speculative, and that still didn't really see play. But we certainly did see this go alongside Jirachi. Zapdos never really became too big of a thing outside of like rogue metas, mainly because it doesn't really have much of a good time against like the Dragapults and stuff, but potentially just sub this out for a Spiritomb, and we almost got the slide like completely right. So yeah, Scoop Up Net, solid card. No reason for it to go anywhere. Tool Scrapper, I rated a 3 star. I think 3 is still relatively correct. It's not played in Pika, Draga. It's played in Spiritomb, Beasts. It's played in Zacian, only because of mirrors, because of like Frying Pan / Goggles. So it's like that 3.5 kind of category, where it's like a sometimes one of in half of the good decks in the format. So yeah, I think 3 is like a decent place for it to sit. A lot of people rated this a lot higher, that 5 star, like it goes into everything. And I'm glad that we identified that this is like, whoa, chill out, play maybe 1 sometimes if it's really important. And I think that's going to continue to be the case. Frying Pan is going, Spell Tag is going, and a Skateboard is going. So there are probably less tools around, but then there are some new good tools coming out, like the Big Cape, the Toughness Cape, I think it's called. So I still think Tool Scrapper will probably be just in those decks that need to math fix, basically. So yeah, there's still Balloon, Big Charm, that sort of stuff. You can see I had Chaotic Swell there because the previous means of removing tools was from that Labs. So I was basically making the point that Scrapper could be played in things like ADPization, where previously I had to play Labs to get around Big Charms, but Swell kind of countered it, so Tool Scrapper did kind of fit that niche. ADPization did go down in play, more than I expected, actually. I think Turbozation was low-key like better than its results showed in the Limitless Invitationals. It did well like pre-Rebel Clash, obviously, but then kind of like teetered off. But it's still like a fine deck, especially because we've saw Spiritomb Beasts kind of make a bit of a comeback. And Blacephalon was super high in play, like a top 5 deck. ADPization's like pretty close against those sorts of archetypes if you play the high Marnie count for sure. So yeah, random tangent on ADPization. But yeah, Scrapper continue to see play in those decks where you gotta bump tools for sure. Burning Scarf, obviously terrible. Curse Shovel, we didn't really see much experimentation with Control. Going into, pre-Rebel Clash, Control was probably like a top 5 deck. Like the Magcargo mill or the Cincino mill. Neither of them would have put Curse Shovel in, I want to say. Mill got significantly worse in Rebel Clash because of things like Dragapult. That just became so difficult to beat. So much pressure coming out the gate. Even if you are energy denying, they can still just be putting on pressure to at least deal with dolls for one attachment. And anytime you can't get a removal off, they just like go haywire on the board. So yeah, Curse Shovel wasn't really like the way around this. Also, there was Boss's Orders. Also, there was Tool Scrapper in the format. So I think Curse Shovel was rightfully like not good enough to be in Control. And Control loses so much, it's going to have to completely go back to the drawing board to see if it'll do well. Now, will Curse Shovel go alongside things like the new Toxtricity meme? Maybe. We'll see. I think Toxtricity probably does want to play Guzhala, because you need to have, what's it called, Glimwood Tangle, the stadium, like all the time. So if you just need to Guzhala a lot in the deck, possibly you're going for like Glimwood, Curse Shovel, and like Capture Energy or something like that, or Speed Lightning Energy, those sorts of plays. So maybe this makes it into the new Toxtricity mill. Let's watch this space. The Palisand mill was absolutely abysmal though when I tried that, so bear that in mind. Curse Shovel doesn't have a good track record so far on stage 1s. Galar Mine I rated 4 stars. It really didn't live up to that much hype at all. I considered this initially as like a one-off in Pika-ROM, just to be a Stadium Bounce option to disrupt some Jirachi players, and I expected Mill to play this much more often, but I think the issue really became that Mill couldn't really take advantage of this. Also, I was a lot more excited about Milotic V before the set was actually released than I was when the set actually came out, because I had started playtesting with Milotic more and more, and it was just like so difficult to get working that everyone dropped it before it even began. So part of the reason the Galar Mine hype was there was we were expecting some more attacking things like Milotic and Tangrowth. That didn't work out. And Control didn't work out as well as we planned. So those sorts of things wrote off Galar Mine straight away. One thing I will say about Galar Mine though is it is super good with Vikavolt V, in my opinion. I think Vika V bossing up stuff and just dropping that Galar Mine in play and starting to do those disconnect plays, I can see that being a problem. So yeah, Galar Mine boss trapping seems like a big deal in the new format. So that's just my initial reaction. I think Galar Mine has a second chance to be quite good, and this stadium is still disruptive for sure, so I wouldn't write it off. It's no longer disruptive against Jirachi though, because you already need a scoop up net or a switch, and a skateboard's gone, so something to bear in mind. Training Court, yeah, outclassed by Viridian. Viridian's still in format, so yeah. Turffield Stadium, rated a 3-star. We saw some Flapple shenanigans, but no more than shenanigans, really. Rillaboom really was a flop, and other than that, we saw that Rowegg was still probably the best way to search stuff. And I don't think there's much new interesting grass stuff from the new set. Oh, there's Decidueye, actually. So Decidueye may be the saving grace for Turffield. I think it naturally goes in the Decidueye deck, unless you're playing Rowegg Decidueye. So yeah, Turffield probably stays around that 3-star kind of range, because Deci is like a new, probably tier 2 deck, I want to say, just from my initial impressions. Capture Energy, we rated a 3-star. Its effect is obviously insane, but there just wasn't really a home for this outside of Control, which sometimes played it, sometimes didn't, because Recycle was still too important and everyone played basic fires just to use my cargo. So yeah, it had no home. I think now it's starting to get a home. We're getting some attackers that have colorless in there. I think most notably Eternatus has a 1 colorless in its attack cost, and peers can search for any energy from the deck. So if you just play 1/2 copies of Capture Energy, you rarely ever get punished for it in Eternatus, and it's just a free search to get like a Hooper down, a Spiritomb down, an Absol down, a second Eternatus V down on the board. So yeah, Capture probably is going to start seeing a bit more of an uptick in play, more towards that 1/2 count. But Piers actually really helps out. It might just end up being that Crobat and Piers becomes like a mini package going in a handful of decks, and Capture Energy becomes like more of a 2-of, as long as we start seeing more colorless energy attackers. So a small thing to bear in mind for sure. Horror Energy rated 4-star. I think it's certainly impactful in Dragapult, and it was always a 4-of in Dragapult. Even the Mali builds played 4 copies, I think, almost always. So it's pretty close to a 5-star, right? It's like that 4.5 to 5 range for sure. All the other Psychic decks didn't play it, like Mewtwo didn't play it because it was Ultimate based. Every other Psychic deck flopped, so I think it was just in Dragapult, but it was really a big factor. So big that you saw Metal Goggles have to be banned for the Limitless Invitational itself, and the bug abuse led to a win. Now, that wasn't the only reason why Turbozation won, but certainly made the Dragapult matchup easier. So yeah, Horror Energy was a really good card. And going forward, do we have any interesting new Psychic stuff? I'm just thinking of Garbodor V VMAX, but that's a terrible card. I don't think there's much else. So yeah, I think Horror Psychic doesn't get worse in a vacuum, but gets worse in a placement just because Dragapult gets worse. And yeah, that's going to be a bit of a worry for it, but super good card for that small period of time. Speed Lightning Energy, rated a 4-star. I actually want to bump this up to a 5 because it's insanity. It's such a good card for Pikarom. This was like one of the only new inclusions Pikarom got, and it pole vaulted it back into Tier 1 just because it's, well, top of Tier 1, let's say. Just because you gained those small percentage points of actually getting towards that full blitz, those small percentage points of finding your extra E-power, or these other little things that just helps you push throughout the entire game. Really, really crazy card. Just getting free draws for nothing is just really insane. So yeah, I want to put this at a 5. Guzhala builds were somewhat of a thing, mainly because Malolana was around, but additionally, just playing 10 basic plus 4 copies of Speed Lightning. I think the craziest build I saw was 12 Lightning and 4 Speed Lightning. I think it was one of the top 8 Limitless lists, or at least a high-placing Limitless list, played that many energy cards. And that's just the statement that Speed Lightning is super insane. Now, Pikarom going forward might have some hardships because it is losing so much. Bolton decks probably are going to stick around, so I don't think Speed Lightning goes to complete obscurity. And also there's Vikavolt things, maybe. I'm thinking that maybe Vikavolt's like going to be some sort of like a Lightning toolbox thing, and you have a couple turns where you try and, maybe even just Gust, Galar Mine, Reset Stamp, and start disconnecting for a few turns, that sort of thing. So I expect Lightning to still feature in the format because it still has a lot of support. Like, just Coco and Speed Lightning Energy alone is still like a lot. So yeah, I think Speed Lightning continues to be pretty solid. Twin Energy, rated at 2-star. It actually did even worse than expected. Look how many people rated that as a 5-star card. And we rated it as a 2, and turns out a 2 was too optimistic. Like, this was absolutely awful. Going forward, though, there is Mad Party, so it has a second chance of Mad Party. Very cool. Appleton, 1-star, awful. Eldegoss, we rated 5-star. Now, this is definitely a 5-star card, but it's still just like, it only really featured in a couple of decks. It was like a maybe in Baby Blounds. It was almost guaranteed in Pikarom. It was usually not in Dragapult and usually not in Combozation, but I still thought it certainly had a place in ADPzation. So because of its versatility and like maybe-ness in so many top tier decks, that I'll still rate it the 5-star. And I think going forward, it's like still in that same tier. It's still just like you could always see it in decks here and there, and you can't really question it too much. So yeah, Eldegoss is still like fine, I think, for sure. Flapple rated 2-star. Just because of those sorts of experimental things. It didn't really work out alongside Dragapult, mainly because Mirror Match was too scary. What else really played Flapple? I didn't see much else experimentation outside of that. Maybe a few people were trying to play it, but for the most part, Scoop Up Net Goon became more standard, I want to say. So Flapple's still an interesting damage modifier. I wonder if we'll see more of it in the future. But now that Dragapult is being less of a threat to the Applins, because the Applins only have 40 hit points and Dragapult just like stomps that and makes like 12 cards in your deck redundant. So maybe with less Dragapult around and more people just smacking the face, aka Eternatus decks, you can maybe see this sort of damage mod being a thing. So something fun to look out for, but still in the fun category, I think. Lombre Ludicolo, we rated 1-star. The top entry Primate Wisdom combo wasn't enough to make the High Spirit Rush a good enough damage output kind of card. So yeah, definitely more on the fun side. Rillaboom and Rillaboom VMAX was actually overrated. It actually performed worse than just regular Rowegg builds of Rillaboom. Way worse. So yeah, this was a pretty overhyped from ourselves and the community as well. Arcanine, obviously terrible stage 1. We rated the Charizard VMAX 1-star. It wasn't in the set, but there's a spoiler for where we want to put Charizard in the next review. Its numbers like aren't terrible, but it's clunky and it's worse than Centiskorch, I think, almost always. And you can see, even before I even saw Centiskorch was a thing, I was comparing this to the times I tried to build Snorlax VMAX. And this is like a higher risk, higher reward Snorlax build. But there was enough risk with the Snorlax, because it didn't work in the first place, that I was already put off. So essentially I remember making the argument that like Snorlax was too hard to make work. You think you can get an extra 2 energies on? Sure. So yeah, that's pretty much the standpoint I still have with this card. Cinderace and Cinderace VMAX we rated 1-star. I think it's more appropriate to bump this up to the 2-star, maybe even 2.5 if you want to be generous. There were plenty of people who were still like believers of this card. Now, performance-wise, Cinderace still hasn't done much at all, so maybe it's justified. But there was definitely buzz around this, and people experimented with it for sure. So I think putting it up to a 2-star is reasonable. Now, again, Centiskorch coming out in the new set, I think just on paper outclasses Cinderace in almost every way, apart from the regular V being better in Cinderace's case. But that's about it. I think you should probably be looking towards Centiskorch if you want a Fire-type VMAX. Lampent, a little top entry boy, didn't really change Chandeler's nature, so it's still a 1-star. Ninetales rated 2-star. This was just thrown in late on, and I think I even misread the card when I put this into the set review. This was like a late arrival, so there's no community review. I just remember this being on someone else's review, and it wasn't on ours, and I was like, oh, we should probably talk about this card because there's some interest there. And it could potentially like knock out a Zacian in one attachment. It never really came to fruition. Stage 1s are still like sketchy at best in decks as like tech cards. And Ditto Prism Star is going, so Stage 1 tech cards become even less relevant, so probably going to be very poor. Ninetales V, rated 3 stars. Where did this card end up? It did go into my build of Sandaconda. Was it really... It wasn't played in Blounds. Well, the box did pretty poor outside of like one Limitless qualifier. Yeah, so Ninetales didn't do great. Now, will it still see play in Sandaconda? Possibly. Definitely possibly. So I think 3 was probably an overstatement. Maybe in that like more 3-2 category. And going forward, maybe Sandaconda becomes a rogue archetype or a counter archetype to try and handle Eternatus. So maybe still in that 2-3 category. So yeah, interesting card. Are we getting many better attackers that this guy can copy? Not hugely, right? There's no, like, attacker that comes out that does more than its hit points. And Eternatus is based on bench, so there's no new good stuff to yoink. But it's still, like, relatively efficient if you're trying to play Colossal. So maybe still a 1-star in a growing rogue. That's the best I can give that card. Ice Q's not doing great. 1 stars for sure. Galarian Rhyme, no extra reason for this to see any more play. So yeah, 1 star. Inteleon V and VMAX. Again, there was more hype on this from the community. I think similar to the Cinderace, this was experimented with a little bit. People were trying it out with Super Scoop Ups and a few other things here and there. Basically, in my book, it's still definitely just a worse variant of Dragapult for sure. Now, Dragapult becomes a lot riskier in terms of its type coverage. Inteleon's weakness gets better, in theory, with no E-Power. So you can't just get turn like 1 or 2 full blitz and they just body you with like an E-Power. So maybe in theory this is a little better. This also gets Rose as a new acceleration option instead of Frostmoth. So you could try like Rose Tower as a combo to try and get him rolling a little bit easier. Maybe some more experimentation. So maybe in the future 2-star because its typing is getting slightly better. Dragapult is getting slightly worse. Maybe this has a slight niche in the meta that it wasn't fulfilling before. Milotic really overrated this card. We rated 3-star. The community actually went even above us for the most part, which is interesting. A glamorous damage output, but the practicality just wasn't there for the card. ADP realized that the format had got to the point where as soon as you've Ultra Creation, you should expect to be dead, so you never really get to Ultimate Ray. Frostmoth was awful with Dragapult around, and Weldering with multiple different energy attachments is too difficult, so Milotic is going to be dropping down that tier list, I would say. Its lightning weakness, again, gets slightly better with it becoming more obscure. Pikarom, I should say. But I still don't think it's enough to push this into like really good echelons. Boltund 4-star, I think pretty fair, but ultimately it's a carry card for the Pikarom deck, and I think if Pikarom is going to be solid going forward, it has to be playing these Boltunds because E-Power can't push you into those high damage outputs anymore. Now it's going to be down to you using Pikarom to get like 6, 7, 8 energy into play, tanking hits, and then just dropping the Lightning Storm on people for huge damage output. So I think Lightning is in a worse spot, but it actually has to lean into Boltund even more if it's going to survive. So I think that could be good news for Boltund. So in that 4 to 4.5 range still, Lightning isn't dead, I still want to say. So yeah, really, really solid card. A great beat stick for Pikarom. Very awesome to see play. Let you do stuff when you were drawing badly, and when you were doing well, it just completely carried versus VMAXs, so sick card. Luxio Luxray actually had like a highlight reel moment in the Limitless qualifier where I think it got top 64. It definitely day 2'd in one of them. So fulfilled some cool niche. Lightning stuff does lose E-Power, so the raid isn't quite the sort of number you needed anymore. You also lose the evolutionary advantage Shinx, but that's not necessarily the problem. This Luxio wasn't even the one that was played. It was mostly the disconnect one, which I believe also rotates. So I think this rogue archetype kind of falls before it even started. Toxtricity and Toxtricity VMAX kind of underestimated how difficult this was to set up. I think we did this for the Toxtricity and the Milotic, so we actually have to rate even harsher than... Well, we were kind of like believers this set, I guess, trying to actually get things working. You lose Thunder Mountain for this deck, and it was already teetering on the edge of being able to keep up with attachments throughout the entire game without the help of Boltund on like opening turns. So I think that's definitely a headache. You're still in that annoying damage range where you're not enough to knock out tag teams. You're not enough to, you know, knock out VMAXs, definitely. So yeah, I think Toxtricity will stay super obscure. Vikavolt rated a 1-star. I don't see a reason why this should be any higher. Nothing new comes out that changes that, I don't think. Clefable was rated the 2-star. I don't think he was even experimented with control for the most part. I think more people were trying out Magcargo shenanigans than Cincino ones. So I want to say that Clefable didn't see a huge amount of play. Now going forward, we get another deck that just attaches one per turn in Eternatus. So maybe some anti-tempo plays of Clefable could be a thing. But I think it's still towards that 1.5 kind of range. So no new cards come out that really help this, I don't think. Dragapult, we rated the 3-star, and weirdly enough, like, this actually loves that the big Dragapult is going to see less play, because it was one of the main reasons why this was so poor. Now, at the same time, this deck is losing Spell Tag, it's losing Treasure, it's losing Malamar, it's losing Mimikyu, it's losing, like, a lot of its toys, so it's kind of just out there on its own these days, so it will probably continue to be, like, the meme. I rated it a 3-star, really believing in that Infiltrator, but it was completely just bodied by the fact that you had to set up 60 hit point Dreepies, and Dragapult playing not just one Zigzagoon, sometimes 2 copies, or 1 Goon, 1 Giratina, just absolutely bodied anything evolving. Now, Dragapult may still, like, the VMAX still may be a deck, and it may find a way to compete against Eternatus, but I'm certainly expecting it to see a lot less play than it did in Rebel Clash, where it was probably top 3 decks. And that might give a small opening for this and a few other evolution decks, but I'm not sure that it's going to be making this deck super high tier. Dragapult VMAX, definite 5-star. Crazy good card, great damage control. You could play it as a straight list, you could play it alongside Malamar. It was actually the straight list that kind of won out, just because the Malamar scoop up list probably had like 6 to 8 slots that weren't consistency cards. And it turned out Dragapult, for the most part, needed those extra Acrobike slots more often than not. One thing missing from this slide was Crushing Hammer. Crushing Hammer and Giratina, the Special Energy Denial Giratina, those things definitely became like mainstays in Pulse just for mirror matches and for ADPs early on in the meta at least. And even against Turbozation, sometimes you could buy a turn just by, you know, negating that early Intrepid Sword, that sort of thing. So yeah, Crushing Hammers definitely became like a mainstay in Pulse and in the meta in general, because of the nature of this deck mostly being one attach at a time. So yeah, interesting stuff overall with Pulse, but certainly a solid card pre-Eternatus, and now Eternatus comes onto the scene. Dragapult has something to be concerned about for sure. Cursula, very poor for sure. Hatterene, awful, stage 2. Palisand, another stage 1 that flopped. Like I said, I tried this. It was way worse than just using the regular Cincino resource strats. Sigilyph, very poor, loses Malamar, not going to be seen again. Colossal and Sandaconda. I was a believer of this, and was a lot of fun to test this out. Definitely it wasn't consistent enough, I don't think, to keep up with the meta at large. Also, those 70 hit points, little Carcoals were in danger, or Roly-Colies, I should say. Were they 70 hit point? I think they were. Of Dragapult. So now with Dragapult hopefully going down in play, any lightning that sticks around, plus Eternatus being hit for weakness, might spell, you know, a good time for Sandaconda going forward. And I think you're only ever playing Sandaconda if you are playing Colossals, so maybe there's a chance for this stage 2 deck to actually be a thing in the meta. Would be a lot of fun. Phalanx, we actually saw, was it Yaneda that made a list of Phalanx recently? But that's a different format in Japan, so I think we've seen how awful it was on ladder a lot. I think I would still give it a 1-star, even though you see it on ladder like all the time for some reason. And I don't think there's a huge reason why it could be much better in the next set other than Eternatus being a thing. So I still think there are better rogues out there. Like, I would say that probably Sandaconda is a stronger deck than Phalanx, but maybe people will experiment with it again just because of typing alone in the next set. Medicham 1-star, we lose Ditto, so probably less relevant going forward. Sandaconda, I rated that 3-star. Oh, Colossal should have been a 2-star, by the way, because it was only really experimented with and didn't have any results. Same for Sandaconda, we'll rate it 2-star, but it's like that 2+, right? It's like, yeah, it didn't do great now, but now its typing's better, so maybe it has a better placement. The reason I still like Sandaconda is that you have that first attack that just means you don't need to candy stage 2. So I still like leaning into that sand as much as possible. We do lose things like Acrobike, which were some of the things that made that sand work early on. I think it was called sand something. I can't remember. It was translated differently to just sand. But yeah, I think the typing is obviously something you need to pay attention to for the next set. Galarian Weezing. Certainly a 1-star. Pretty overrated, I think, by the community. It was experimented with for a few people in the opening weeks, but I think quite quickly fell off the radar. So Galarian Weezing wasn't disruptive enough. Even though there were Zacians, Jirachi engines, and all that sort of stuff going around, the damage output just wasn't there. And you need to set up Toxicroaks to try and make him work for the most part. There weren't good enough hit and run decks to make this work. I don't think that's going to change going forward. So Galarian Weezing will continue to be obscure. You do get the new Darkness Hide energy that may help out, but overall I still can't see it being great. So we'll keep it at that 1-star. Garbodor we rated 4-star almost exclusively because of Toxtricity that we believed in, and Garb almost always went in that. Now, Garb actually wasn't always the best way to play Toxtricity. Some people played it without Garb and just played Koga's Trap. So just on that alone, you got to drop it lower. Toxtricity flopped, which means you drop it lower. So the only real... So we'll drop Garb to like a 2-star for like experimentation in a tier 3 deck in Toxtricity. Going forward, it could be an Eternatus damage mod because it's a dark type. It's almost always worse than... Well, it could go in addition to the Zigzagoons that you're already playing, right? And possibly playing a Garb line instead of like Candy Obstagoon is better. So maybe Garb sees play for exactly that reason. But yeah, I think that's going to be it. So kind of like that 2+ category, I think, for Garb. Grimmsnarl, again, we rated early because we'd just seen the cards and we thought we were doing a set review, so we may as well just add it in. But I can't see this being too different going forward, especially, like I said with the Charizard. Charizard is overshadowed by Centiskorch, Grimmsnarl overshadowed by Eternatus, obviously. Hydreigon, Stage 2, again, we didn't get it in this format, so we couldn't really see how it functioned for Dark Box stuff. But I would be super hesitant to say it's going to be better than that 2-star. I'm probably dropping it lower in the next review. Malamar VMAX was experimented with a little bit. People were trying it with like Green's Miss Magius counter gains shenanigans to be this sort of counter to Dragapult, but it really didn't see any success at all. So I'm happy we stuck to our guns and rated it low. I think it should stay there, to be honest. And the dark typing gets worse because you kind of get caught in that crossfire of like Dragapult's already going down in play, and well, this is weak to grass instead of fighting, right? I think Eternatus is weak to fighting, so I guess it doesn't really get caught in the crossfire too much, but the main selling point of this card was to target Dragapult, right? And that's just gone now. Aegislash, Stage 2. Copperajah, we rated that 3-star. It actually saw like no play at all. This has actually quite surprised me. Possibly because ADP Zacian was already like falling off a cliff, and Combo Zacian was just like that hotness kind of thing. Also probably just because Baby Blounds was too popular for this card to be good. So those are the main reasons why it didn't do too great. But I was expecting there to be some tanking Copperajah builds with that Luke Metal, and I was expecting some like Berserker builds, but no one really experimented with enough. Maybe if there were more tournaments or whatever, we could have seen some daylight for this card. Maybe even like a 1-1 line in ADP Zacian, but again, that list is tighter than you'd expect. More people trying to commit like order pads and E-switches into ADP Zacian to keep it relevant than a stage 1 line. So yeah, makes sense. We got to drop this down to a 1-star. I don't think it was even experimented with in ADP Zacian or Luke Metal much at all. Duraludon rated a 2-star. I think it's got to go down to that 1-star, actually. I was mainly expecting it to go into some of the Copperajah stuff, so feels bad. A Galarian Meowth rated that 3-star. Most Zacian builds didn't go down this route. I remember rating this a 3-star, saying to myself that the ADP GX attack is a lot worse. This is the way we do good damage. But instead, the better route was ADP is not very good anymore. Let's yoink easier prizes through the Jirachi package. So Berserker basically lost out to the Jirachi package Jirachi is going, but at the same time, there are more VMAXs coming into the format, so that 270 range isn't as good as it used to be. So I think if Zacian's going to work in the future, it probably still won't play Berserker. So I'm probably going to have to rate this lower, rate it down to like that 2-star, maybe even 1-star. Like, I wouldn't hate anyone playing like a 1-1 or 2-2 Berserker in Zacian going forward, but I just don't think it's great, so we'll rate it 1. Probopass, we established that it was worse than Tangrowth, and that's still the case, so still a 1. Chatot, definite 1. You can guarantee things, so do that instead. Double, rated 2-star. Community are a little bit more hype on it for the most part. It didn't see much success. Now, we have seen some wacky lists even recently where people are trying to force the opponent to take prizes with the Miss Magius stuff, or with a few other sort of gambits like Electrode, and then you just start smacking with a double. I don't think it's great, to be honest. I think it's like average. So I think experimentation is still the best way to put this card. The Welder Box decks didn't do great either. I could consider this as a one-of in Welder Box, as like a late game threat, as like a bomb. But that relies you on drawing this card in the mid to late game, which is so difficult to do when you're playing Welder and having to slam those to Denes and stuff. So I think that's a bit of a problem. Going forward, Double does gain powerful colorless energy to potentially increase its damage output. It also gains the toughness cape that you can put on it to make it even tankier. So maybe we could re-roll that Double combo deck and see if it works with potential extra damage and extra hit points on the Double. Maybe it could start getting some dubs of its own. Terrible pun. We'll stick at 2-star for that alone. Greedent, we rated 1-star, obviously. It's a stage 1, and basically no one plays stage 1s unless like they're the main attacker, and even then, yeah. So yeah, the overall ratings doesn't really matter too much, but we'll just do this just for some context, how we rated it all before. But yeah, that was the Rebel Clash set review. We were actually wrong on a few things. We were believers on the Milotic, Toxtricity, and even the Rillaboom front. We were pretty accurate on almost everything else, though. Hopefully this has been interesting for you guys to watch, and hopefully it gets you hyped up for the next set. The community set review is in the description below if you want to start having a look at the Darkness Ablaze stuff. It's all translated and easy to follow, so it's a really good thing for us, and obviously you can see and compare to our own ratings on the channel. It provides some extra context for when we're wrong, the community can cover our backs and get things correct. So that's the whole idea about it. And also, if you don't agree with any of our opinions, you can see how other people are thinking about those cards as well. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. The set review is not going to be the next video that we upload, but we're hoping it's soon. It's completely based on when we actually get those confirmations. So we need a couple English scans to know set numbers, and then we can immediately like begin with the set review. But until then, you can do your own ratings and follow our future videos. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.